We call it the big one because we expect the next San Andreas earthquake to be in the upper magnitude 7s to a magnitude 8, which is a very large earthquake.
How much is it going to cost? How many lives are going to be lost when we have another big earthquake? It's going to be tens of billions of dollars and hundreds, if not thousands, of lives lost.
California woke up to terror at 6:47 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The ground lurched violently as an 8.2 magnitude earthquake ripped through the Bay Area without mercy or warning. Buildings collapsed in seconds across Oakland and San Francisco. Roads split apart like broken glass. Power vanished instantly. Sirens screamed, then went silent. This was not a routine earthquake Californians joke about surviving. This was the nightmare scenario scientists have warned about for generations. The Hayward Fault, silent for more than a century, had finally snapped with catastrophic force. The rupture began deep beneath Fremont, 12 kilometers underground, where tectonic pressure had been quietly accumulating since the 19th century. Within seconds, the fracture raced northward along the entire 85-mile length of the Hayward Fault. Seismographs spiked off the charts. Computers struggled to process the incoming data. In less than 8 seconds, the fault system was fully engaged, releasing energy equivalent to 32 million tons of TNT. The Earth did not shake. It convulsed violently. Ground motion reached levels never recorded in modern California history. Peak ground acceleration exceeded 2 times the force of gravity in multiple locations. That meant the ground itself was moving faster than objects could fall. Buildings designed to flex instead shattered. Foundations snapped. Columns failed. Oakland absorbed the first brutal blow, where century-old structures collapsed before residents could even stand. Berkeley experienced intensity levels where reinforced buildings suffered catastrophic damage. Engineering models failed completely. The sound was unforgettable. Survivors described a deep, thunderous roar, rising instantly into a violent tearing noise as bedrock ripped apart beneath the city. Windows exploded outward. Glass cascaded onto sidewalks. Car alarms triggered simultaneously across 9 counties, creating a deafening mechanical scream layered over human panic. Skyscrapers in San Francisco swayed far beyond their design tolerances, bending like reeds in a storm. The shaking continued for nearly a full minute. Surface rupture appeared almost instantly along the fault trace. Roads split open with visible offsets measuring up to 12 feet. Sidewalks became staircases. Property lines shifted permanently as the Pacific Plate lurched northward past the North American Plate. Entire neighborhoods were physically displaced. In some locations, houses were torn in half as the ground beneath them moved in opposite directions. This was not localized damage. It was regional devastation unfolding in real time. Aftershocks began immediately. A magnitude 6.1 struck just 2 minutes after the main rupture. Another 5.8 followed minutes later. Each aftershock collapsed additional weakened structures and reignited terror among survivors who believed the worst had passed. Emergency phone lines flooded instantly. Dispatch centers were overwhelmed. Calls came faster than operators could answer. Many calls ended abruptly as buildings collapsed mid-conversation. The Earth was not finished. Within 90 seconds, more than 200 structures collapsed across Oakland and Berkeley. Unreinforced masonry buildings disintegrated instantly. Apartment complexes pancaked, compressing multiple floors into spaces barely 3 feet tall. Thousands were trapped beneath concrete and steel. The morning commute made everything worse. Vehicles were crushed beneath collapsing overpasses. Drivers abandoned cars and ran as the ground continued to heave beneath their feet in horror. The Bay Bridge suffered catastrophic failure. A 200-foot section of the eastern span collapsed into the water, severing the primary connection between San Francisco and the East Bay. Traffic cameras captured vehicles plunging into the bay before power failed. Highway 880 saw multiple elevated sections collapse, repeating the nightmare of 1989 on a far deadlier scale. Oakland International Airport's runway cracked open, shutting operations instantly. BART tunnels flooded as hundreds of water mains ruptured simultaneously. Millions of gallons poured underground. Trains stopped instantly. Emergency lighting failed. Riders trapped between stations waded through rising water in darkness, guided only by shouted instructions and panic. The Transbay tube sustained structural damage engineers would not assess for days. Downtown San Francisco became a war zone, as glass facades shattered on dozens of high-rises at once. Fire erupted everywhere. Ruptured gas lines ignited more than 150 separate fires within minutes. Water main breaks rendered hydrants useless. Firefighters watched helplessly as entire blocks burned unchecked. Power grid failures plunged millions into darkness. Cell towers collapsed. Emergency radio systems overloaded. Communication failed when it was needed most. The technological backbone of modern California simply stopped functioning under the strain of simultaneous failure. By 7:30 a.m., confirmed deaths exceeded 400, with thousands more missing or trapped. Emergency responders were completely overwhelmed. Oakland and San Francisco fire departments received over 4,000 emergency calls in the first 30 minutes alone. Every available unit deployed immediately, yet they faced impossible math. There were simply not enough responders, not enough equipment, and not enough time to save everyone calling for help. At the California Office of Emergency Services in Sacramento, full crisis protocols activated within minutes. Governor Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency less than 30 minutes after the quake, the fastest declaration in state history. National Guard units mobilized statewide. Helicopters launched rescue missions despite smoke, debris, and damaged landing zones. Evacuation orders were issued for hundreds of thousands, but highways were impassable and airports closed. Ferry boats became lifelines. Vessels designed for 2,000 passengers carried 4 times that number as desperate residents fled across the bay. Emergency shelters opened across 9 counties, immediately exceeding capacity. Families slept on gymnasium floors. Hospitals evacuated patients as aftershocks continued. Nurses carried patients down stairwells when elevators failed. Doctors triaged care with limited power and dwindling supplies amid constant tremors. The human stories were heartbreaking. In Oakland, a mother shielded her children under a doorframe as their apartment collapsed around them. They survived 8 hours trapped in darkness before rescue crews reached them. In the Berkeley Hills, entire homes slid downhill, leaving residents standing in the street with nothing but the clothes they wore. First responders made impossible choices, deciding which cries for help to answer first. By midday, more than 2,000 people were unaccounted for. Social media filled with missing person photos, last known locations, desperate pleas for information. Highland Hospital evacuated hundreds after structural damage compromised patient safety. Tech campuses emptied as employees fled. San Francisco's financial district fell silent, its glass towers standing hollow and dangerous. The Bay Area, once humming with economic power, was suddenly frozen in shock. Then came the haunting question. The warnings had been there. 3 days before the quake, monitoring stations detected unprecedented electromagnetic anomalies. Seismic swarms erupted across California and Nevada. Dozens of moderate earthquakes clustered in abnormal patterns. Scientists observed signals that defied existing models. Yet no evacuation orders were issued. The ethical dilemma loomed large. Warn millions and risk panic, or stay silent and hope catastrophe never arrives. The Hayward Fault had been locked since 1868. For 160 years, stress accumulated as the Pacific Plate moved northward 2 inches per year. That energy had nowhere to go until now. When it finally released, it did so completely. The entire fault ruptured simultaneously at shallow depth, maximizing surface destruction. This was the exact scenario seismologists feared most, finally realized in brutal detail. Attention quickly turned to the San Andreas Fault. Stress transfer between faults is well documented. The Hayward rupture altered pressure across the Calaveras, Green Valley, and potentially the San Andreas itself. The southern San Andreas has not ruptured since 1857. Scientists warn it is capable of a magnitude 7.8 or greater earthquake. The fear is not hypothetical. It is mathematical and deeply unsettling. Beyond California, concern spread to the Cascadia subduction zone. That fault has not produced a major earthquake since 1700. When it does, scientists expect a magnitude 9 event. The Eastern Pacific experiences fewer earthquakes, but when stress releases, it does so catastrophically. The Hayward quake reignited fears that the western United States is entering a period of heightened seismic instability, unseen in modern history. Economic damage estimates skyrocketed within hours. Preliminary figures ranged from $250 to $400 billion, making this the costliest natural disaster in American history. Infrastructure losses alone exceeded $80 billion. The Bay Bridge required complete replacement. BART tunnels faced years of repair. Water systems serving millions were destroyed. More than 150,000 buildings suffered major damage or total collapse. The insurance industry reeled. Fewer than 15% of California properties carried earthquake insurance. Tens of thousands of families discovered they had no financial protection at all. Insurers that did offer coverage faced tens of billions in claims, threatening insolvency. Entire communities faced rebuilding without resources. The disaster exposed a financial fault line as dangerous as the geological one beneath the state. Federal response escalated rapidly. FEMA deployed its largest domestic operation ever. Congress debated emergency aid packages amid political tension. Questions arose about building code enforcement and retrofitting failures. Investigations revealed hundreds of collapsed buildings had not been upgraded despite legal mandates. Accountability debates erupted even as rescue operations continued. The disaster became both a humanitarian crisis and a political reckoning. Supply chains fractured nationwide. The Port of Oakland shut down indefinitely, halting 40% of West Coast container traffic. Retail shortages appeared within days. Tourism collapsed overnight. Silicon Valley companies shifted operations elsewhere, uncertain when or if they would return. The economic ripple effects extended far beyond California, touching every corner of the national economy with alarming speed. 1 week later, aftershocks continued relentlessly. The official death toll climbed toward 2,000, with hundreds still missing. Recovery timelines stretched into decades. Entire neighborhoods were deemed uninhabitable. Families faced permanent displacement. Yet beneath the rubble, a deeper fear persisted. Had this earthquake merely relieved one fault while loading another? Was California now standing on the edge of something even worse? Seismologists spoke cautiously but honestly. Earthquakes cannot be predicted with certainty, only probabilities assessed. What they knew was sobering. The Hayward Fault had released its energy, but others remained dangerously loaded. The San Andreas, the Cascadia subduction zone, and numerous secondary faults were all capable of catastrophic failure. California had not escaped disaster. It had entered a new and terrifying chapter. The ground eventually stilled, but nothing returned to normal. Streets were empty, skylines scarred, lives permanently altered. California learned its lessons in rubble and smoke, written in collapsed concrete and extinguished fires. The Hayward Fault had awakened, reminding the world that beneath civilization lies relentless geological force. The only remaining question was not if another quake would come, but when, and whether anyone would be ready. Night falls over the Bay Area, but darkness brings no calm. Aftershocks continue every 20 to 30 minutes, each one reopening psychological wounds and collapsing structures already pushed beyond their limits. Survivors refuse to sleep indoors. Parks, parking lots, and open fields fill with tens of thousands of people wrapped in blankets, staring at the skyline, waiting for the ground to move again. Every vibration, every passing truck, triggers panic. Search and rescue operations shift into their most critical phase. The first 72 hours are known as the golden window, when trapped victims still have a chance of survival. Crews work around the clock, rotating every 12 hours, using thermal cameras, listening devices, and search dogs. The smell of gas and smoke hangs constantly in the air. Heavy machinery moves carefully, because one wrong vibration could collapse void spaces where survivors are still breathing. In downtown Oakland, rescuers locate a pocket beneath a collapsed apartment complex where 5 people have survived nearly 24 hours without water. Extraction takes 6 hours. 2 victims do not make it out alive. Fire Captain James Wilson later says the hardest part is not the physical exhaustion, but the moment you realize someone you heard calling earlier has gone silent. Those moments haunt responders long after the tools are packed away. Hospitals across Northern California operate under disaster standards of care. Elective procedures are canceled indefinitely. Doctors make triage decisions no one ever wants to make, prioritizing those with the highest chance of survival. Medical supply shortages emerge by day 3. Blood banks issue emergency appeals nationwide. Field hospitals rise in parking lots and fairgrounds as the injured continue to arrive faster than beds can open. The psychological toll becomes visible almost immediately. Crisis counselors report severe acute stress reactions in both survivors and responders. Children refuse to let go of parents. Adults break down without warning. Many residents describe a persistent sensation that the ground is still moving, even when it is not. Mental health experts warn that post-traumatic stress disorder rates will rival those seen after major wars. Engineers begin structural assessments, and the findings are grim. Entire sections of San Francisco's financial district are declared unsafe for months or years. Dozens of high-rises will require partial demolition. Some cannot be saved at all. In the East Bay, thousands of homes are red-tagged, meaning entry is forbidden. Homeowners are allowed 5 minutes to retrieve essential belongings under supervision before being locked out indefinitely. Public anger begins to surface alongside grief. Residents demand to know why known weak buildings were never retrofitted. Journalists uncover records showing years of delayed compliance, loopholes, and lax enforcement. City officials face intense scrutiny. Lawsuits begin forming within days. The disaster shifts from a natural event to a human one, exposing systemic failures layered atop geological inevitability. On day 4, seismologists deliver an unsettling update. Stress modeling shows measurable changes along the southern San Andreas Fault. The probability of a major rupture has increased, though no timeline can be given. Officials struggle with messaging, warn too strongly and risk mass panic, say too little and risk repeating history. Emergency preparedness campaigns are relaunched overnight, but trust has already been shaken. California's identity itself comes under question. For decades, residents accepted earthquakes as a price of living in one of the world's most dynamic regions. This event feels different. The scale, the cost, the permanence of loss forces families and businesses to reconsider everything. Relocation inquiries surge. School districts plan for long-term displacement. Some neighborhoods may never be rebuilt. Weeks pass, and the rubble slowly gives way to empty space. The aftershocks fade, but the silence they leave behind is heavy. Memorials appear at collapsed buildings, bridges and transit stations. Names are read aloud. Candles burn at night. The final death toll stabilizes, but the number represents only a fraction of the lives permanently altered. California did not just experience an earthquake, it crossed a threshold. The Hayward Fault delivered a reminder written in physics and tragedy. Preparation delays have consequences, and the planet does not negotiate. Other faults still wait, loaded and silent. The question facing California, and the world watching, is whether this catastrophe becomes a turning point, or a warning ignored until the next rupture answers it. As recovery enters its second month, the Bay Area exists in a strange limbo between survival and uncertainty. Debris removal begins, but progress is painfully slow. Every cleared street reveals more damage beneath the surface. Cracked sewer lines leak into basements. Sinkholes open where underground infrastructure failed. Engineers warn that some areas may remain unsafe for years, not because of visible destruction, but because the ground itself has been permanently altered. Schools remain closed indefinitely. Entire districts relocate classes online or move students to temporary facilities hundreds of miles away. Parents face impossible choices between jobs, housing, and their children's education. Small businesses, already operating on thin margins before the quake, shut down permanently by the thousands. Handwritten, closed signs become a permanent feature of once vibrant neighborhoods. The federal government announces long-term housing assistance, but demand far exceeds supply. Temporary housing units arrive slowly. Rental prices in surrounding counties explode as displaced residents compete for limited space. Tensions rise between locals and newcomers. Communities fracture under the pressure of scarcity, grief, and exhaustion. Scientists continue to analyze data from the rupture, rewriting textbooks in real time. The Hayward earthquake challenges long-held assumptions about maximum fault magnitude and rupture behavior. Research papers describe it as a once-in-several-thousand-years event that occurred in the worst possible location. Seismologists quietly acknowledge that similar assumptions may be wrong elsewhere. Public interest in earthquake preparedness spikes nationwide. Emergency kits sell out within hours. States far from California review their own infrastructure vulnerabilities. For a brief moment, the entire country pays attention. But attention fades quickly. History suggests lessons learned in tragedy are often forgotten in comfort. For those who lived through it, forgetting will never be possible. The sound of collapsing concrete, the feeling of the ground moving like liquid, the sight of familiar skylines broken forever. These memories become permanent markers in time. Life resumes, but it resumes differently. California rebuilds because it always has. Steel rises where concrete fell. Bridges are redesigned. Codes are rewritten. But beneath every new foundation lies the same restless geology, unchanged and indifferent. The Hayward Fault has spoken, and others remain silent only for now. The megaquake of 2026 will be remembered not just as a disaster, but as a warning carved into the landscape itself, a reminder that the ground beneath our feet is never truly still, and that preparation is the only fragile defense humanity has against forces that cannot be stopped, only survived. Here are approximately 200 more words, continuing cleanly and tonally consistent. In the months that follow, anniversaries become markers of grief rather than celebration. January 26th is etched into memory the way September 11th or Hurricane Katrina once were. Sirens pause at 6:47 a.m. across the Bay Area. Construction stops. People stand still, listening to silence where chaos once lived. Children who survived the quake grow up with drills that feel less like practice and more like memory. Earthquake kits stay packed by doors. Shoes are kept beside beds. The ground is no longer trusted. Even on calm days, a passing truck can make hearts race. Policy changes move slowly, but they do move. Mandatory retrofits expand statewide. Early warning systems receive massive funding. Scientists are given greater authority to issue public advisories when anomalous signals appear. The hope is not prediction, but mitigation, buying seconds, saving lives. Yet the final truth remains unavoidable. California sits atop a complex web of faults that will rupture again. No technology can stop it. No law can prevent it. The only choice is whether the next earthquake finds a population informed, prepared, and resilient, or once again, caught in the moment the Earth decides to move.